And the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, has pushed back on the Ministry of Defence's new diversity proposals, claiming they would risk the department's national security.
Yes, the 2023 British Army's Race Action Plan outlined that internal security checks were a barrier in improving minority representation.
But Mr Shapps said that he will not lower security checks to bow to quote-unquote woke nonsense in the army.
So which is it? Let's speak to author and broadcaster Nichi Hodgson on this. Nichi, thank you for joining us. Now, a lot has been said about how the army is becoming woker and woker by the day, and this all relates to recruitment policies, the drive for diversity. Senior people in the military, very senior figures, have called this out and said that actually it's putting our national security at risk.
Well, I've had a little look at this, and the security details are quite vague. It seems to be that the thing that's going to be altered is a residency status of somebody from overseas coming to join the army. It's nothing to do with terrorist checks or any of the rest of it. So from that perspective, I don't actually see what all the fuss is about. The other thing I would say is the reason we are having to recruit from overseas is because we don't have enough British soldiers that want to be in the army anymore. So if that's the issue, the army needs to sort its act out, get its act together, and make it a more desirable occupation or place to work. I mean, it's only just this week that we've had that Ministry of Defence report about the appalling treatment of women at the MoD. You know, people raped, sexually harassed, groped in offices where there were other people witness to the events. The army has got a massive problem. I actually think this is the least of its issues.
But Nichi, what's more important, representation, boosting diversity in the forces, or actually making sure that we have the most competent people who are willing to go out on the battlefield for us and risk their lives?
Well, I don't think this is about DER at all. I think that's a total smokescreen. What I think it's about is tactically employing foreign nationals from other countries that can give us intelligence about where they live, how people think. You know, actually, if I was thinking about hiring the perfect army, I would want lots of people from diverse backgrounds in, because they would have information that would be so valuable to our defence forces.
Yes, and certainly we know that MI6 and MI5 do like to recruit people who have perhaps dual nationalities and who do have very good language skills. But this isn't just what the big outcry has been about. We've seen this letter signed by eminent military figures, an open letter to the Defence Secretary, that speak also about members of the armed forces wearing makeup on marches, perhaps a breakdown in the sort of structure and order of an armed force, which should be perhaps less about individual identity and more about collective security.
I do understand that point, Tom. I mean, I would like to know more details about that, because I'm sure women soldiers have worn makeup for years. So, you know, there's probably an argument to be made there about everybody gets to wear it or nobody does. I understand what you're saying about the uniform issue. But I think subtle makeup is neither here nor there, is it? I mean, I think the main issue here is that actually diversity is good for all organisations. Do you know why? Because the wider the pool of people you have, the more diverse their backgrounds, the greater your intelligence for your operation.
I think a lot of people would agree with you that diversity is a good thing in many, many ways, but not if it comes at the cost of unity. And this is the thing when it comes to policy and recruitment policies. You want people to be committed to the same values and to focus on what unifies an army and its personnel, rather than, as Tom says, always on the individual and their rights and their self-expression and their sexuality and their gender identity and so on.
Well, I think what's actually important then is to look at history. Look at how many foreign nationals have served us in the British Army. Look at the black GIs that came over in the Second World War. Look at the Gurkhas. We've got a long and strong history of people coming from the Commonwealth to serve us and to work together with us. I don't understand why the principles and the lessons learnt there can't just be applied to other countries, especially if they're allied countries.
Well, let's broaden this out now and welcome in the British Army officer, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford. Stuart, thank you so much for joining us. And Nichi, do stay on the line, please. Let's talk particularly about what Nichi has said here, that a greater level of diversity can improve the battle readiness of an armed force.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I think that diversity, rather than weakening the armed forces, actually enhances them. because those from different ethnic backgrounds bring different experiences and different expertise, and that is very much a good thing. What I think we've got to be careful of is not going into the place where we actually allocate quotas to people from different ethnic backgrounds, because I think that, well, first of all, it's illegal, and secondly, it's not recruiting on merit, and I think merit has always got to be the final arbiter.
Do you think there's a risk that in our recruitment to the army that actually diversity is sometimes put ahead of competence? Because as a bystander, as a member of the public, what we want from our armed forces is for them to be the very best people, the very best trained, the most committed to keeping this country safe. I don't care what they look like or what their gender identity is.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, they can all be Martians as long as they're the best people for the job. But I think there is a great pressure on the armed services to widen its diversity, if I can use that phrase. The RAF recruiting fell foul of that when it was discovered that they were holding back white applicant pilots in favour of ethnic minority and female pilots, rather than selecting just on pure ability. And that's a dangerous road to go down.
Why don't we throw that over to Nichi? Nichi Hodgson is still with us. Are there instances, perhaps, in recent years where quality has been sacrificed for equality?
I don't know. That's difficult. That's difficult to know about the army in particular because I'm not an expert in it. But the one thing I would say is that sometimes you don't need official quotas, but sometimes you definitely need to push numbers up to get a broader sweep of people. I mean, looking at that MoD report this week about sexual harassment, I can only think that more women, in particular in the top roles, would make a difference. I mean, that hasn't always played out. Let's just look at what happened to Dame Cressida Dick when she was head of the Met. Disastrous behaviour there. So, I mean, it's got to be a combination of these things, but we definitely need the most diverse pool of candidates we can have for the army.
And Stuart, just lastly, is there a danger with recruitment to the armed forces, the MoD being run by being outsourced, so the government doesn't necessarily oversee some of these recruitment policies?
Well, I mean, I'm of the old school, and I'm well aware that the difficulties the outsourced recruiter for the army, which is Capita, of course, has faced in terms of getting applicants through the selection process up to the point where they're actually presented to the various arms for the actual selection. There is no substitute, in my opinion, for going down to the local army recruiting office, where Colour Sergeant McNasty is the first filter. And he will tell you straight away whether he thinks you're suitable for what you're trying to do, or indeed in which direction you might be pointed within the armed services. But that's an old-fashioned view, and others will disagree. And I suspect that the reason it's been outsourced is because it's cheaper.
Yes, probably. Well, thank you very much indeed for your insight. British Army officer, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, and of course, Nichi Hodgson, author and broadcaster. Great to speak to you. Let us know what you think. Has the army gone a bit too woke, particularly when it comes to its recruitment policies?